Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk Podcast. Got a very special guest today. He is the host of the Crunch Time Podcast. You can watch it Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Himself, Lucas Klotz, Michael Gentry, and Booner. They do a phenomenal job in terms of just Detroit Lions coverage, Detroit sports. Definitely check them out. All their links are down in the description below, all their social media if you want to go check them out. But Jeff, man, welcome back to the show, brother.
Man, I appreciate you having me. I had a blast last time. I appreciate the plug there. You guys can check us out. And I see you doing a great job. I mean, for someone that has to just strictly focus on the Pistons, and you are doing very well, I applaud you, my friend, because I've put out a couple videos, especially now with Trajan Langdon getting hired. Man, I got to go into like a deep, dark, like mindset to talk some Pistons. But I can't wait. I love doing it. I do it every week with Sean, and I love doing it with you too, man. It's good to see you.
For sure. I mean, I think this week I did a full NBA lottery reaction with Bleacher Report. It was like 30 minutes. And I was like, bro, I miss getting into these NBA draft. Like, even though the Pistons got 5 again, like I still love the NBA draft. I still love watching highlights of all these prospects. And we'll talk about it later in the podcast. But like you said, the Pistons hired a new president of basketball operations, Trajan Langdon. So I want to know, what were your initial thoughts of the selection of him being hired? And are you like most Pistons fans I saw on Twitter that were extremely negative with this hire?
Yeah, I think the Arn Tellem side of things kind of just turned people off immediately. But looking at it objectively, I think I actually do like the hire. The video I made on it, the points I hit on and what I liked about Trajan, because we have to be realistic. Tim Connolly, now that the Timberwolves advance, I think that idea of that opt-out being realistic and the Pistons bringing him in, you got to get a president of basketball operations before the draft. So, that pipe dream was no longer a pipe dream. And Trajan, I think, was the best, most qualified hire. And the thing I love most about Trajan Langdon is his experience, and I said this on Crunch Time too, is his experience overseas. You look at where the NBA is heading, in the influx of European superstars, European talent. I mean, it's becoming more, it's a global game, but now you're seeing more European talent, especially now watching the Mavericks with Luka. But that's what I love about Trajan is he's linked in overseas. And I think that's the side of the draft and the side of scouting that you just have to be involved in. And I do. I like him. He's a smart guy. Obviously, he went to Duke, was a hell of a player, but he's just played all around the world. And I'm curious. I mean, you can't really judge a guy just off the cover. I mean, that's all we have until the big move. And I think a lot of Pistons fans would agree with me. I think a way to get respect would be, I know at least Tom Gores is giving him some freedom, but you come in and fire Troy Weaver. I think that to me is like the first, like, hey, I'm here move. But I like the hire, Anthony, if I'm being honest with you. I do.
Yeah, same here. I talked to buddies of mine that cover the Pelicans, and they were like, you never really know. They're like assistant coaches because David Griffin makes most of the decisions over there. So we really don't know, even though he was the general manager of the Pelicans, we really don't know like how involved he was with some of the Pelicans draft picks. Because if you look at their draft, and why I was kind of hyped up about the move was they're not in the top 5 of the lottery. It's like every year. Like Zion was the one pick where they were top 5. Trading up for guys like a Trey Murphy with the Grizzlies. I like that. Getting a guy like Herb Jones in the second round, who's just such an underrated defender. And I like, to your point, the overseas thing I think is very important. And he got his stripes being a scout with the San Antonio Spurs, one of the best runs organizations in the NBA over the past 25 years. Like, I think there's a lot to like with Trajan Langdon. I know some Pistons fans are going to bring up the Tellem thing. I understand it. I get it. But you have to realize Arn Tellem during his heyday repped a good, 15 to 20% of the NBA.
Everybody.
I mean, he was Kobe Bryant's agent. Like, if I was a player, I would want Arn Tellem as my agent because I know I'm getting the bag. Like, Kobe was getting those $35 million contracts when they weren't popular, and that was because of Arn Tellem. I know Pistons fans are going to be like, oh, there's nepotism. Well, Trajan Langdon was, up for GM jobs, president jobs across the NBA. He's only 48 years old. He's very young. I think we have to just sit back and watch him, give him a chance before we kind of get the pitchforks out already.
Yeah, it's a tough job, especially walking into this franchise, given where they are, and not just the. I mean, they have some talented players to work with, but for him, it's a real test and a hell of a promotion. And that's what I at least watching the interviews. I know you posted something on Twitter as well, and I watched that immediately when you posted it. But just how his mindset on drafting players and what he values in a top 5 pick, and I think a lot of what he thinks in terms of identifying talent should be, it aligns with where the Pistons are. Like you have to draft for high upside guys that can become superstars, because at least with this, not just the market, because I think Detroit is a decent market, just in general, but where the team is, like it's going to be hard to attract anything in free agency. So I like his approach, but like you said, I always do this, not just with the Pistons, but other sports teams. The Lions, same thing. When you bring in anybody or trade for a player, I'll always go and watch the team he was from, or the team for a executive, go watch New Orleans, anything New Orleans Pelicans related, just to see what they think about Trajan. And the biggest thing they always say is like kind of what you said, is the unknown. Because he wasn't, they compared him to the backup quarterback. Everybody loves the backup quarterback, always. Yeah. It's the same thing we have here in Detroit before Jared Goff signed with Hendon Hooker, but that's how it seems. So until we have more results, until he makes moves, it's hard to really grade him. But initially, I think all people should like the hire. Out of all the candidates, I like Trajan the most. And I watched your video breaking down all the candidates, and me and you were kind of aligned with a lot of the guys that were brought in to be interviewed. So we shall see, but so far, I do. I'm excited to see what he does.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if anyone had really talked about this, because I kind of heard it just through the grapevine that, the 2 finalists were Trajan Langdon and Dennis Lindsey from Utah. Mm-hmm. So obviously the Pistons interviewed Trajan not once but twice, and they really liked him. And if you go back and listen to his interviews, you'll get it. He says all the right things, very well spoken. I think a lot of people are going to like him, his professionalism, the way he conducts himself. He's not the loudest guy. He's kind of like a little bit soft spoken, but honestly, I'm willing to give him a chance and see what he does. And I know we talked about it a little bit earlier. I don't honestly think Troy Weaver is going to be here either. I think they're just going to clean house with him. Troy was a placeholder, if you want to call it that. He got the Pistons top 5 picks, have a ton of young talent. Now, whether or not you want to keep him, that's up to him. But I just don't see a position where Troy would want to, still be in the Pistons organization when he was making the shots. I doubt he wants to be a scout, because he does have a scouting background. Maybe he goes back to OKC, kind of like the Matt Patricia thing with, going back to Bill Belichick. I really don't know. Like, I just see the Pistons moving on from him ultimately.
I think that move would gain a lot of respect. And that's the thing, especially where the Pistons are and where Pistons fans are at mentally with what they've had to endure. I mean, there has to be a move to kind of, it's got to be Trajan's imprint, and if you fire Troy Weaver, I know the report was circling that he has the freedom to fire Troy Weaver and Monty Williams. I like Monty. I think he should stay, because I don't know what sample size we have with Monty, but Troy Weaver, there's a big enough sample size to know. I just think, like you said, for Troy, maybe it's a little bit of ego too to be demoted. At that point, you just fire him and allow Trajan to kind of work there. And the thing I try to do with the Pistons, and I do this with all organizations in Detroit, I did this with the Lions when Brad Holmes was brought in. And I know it's so hard to hear this, but I try to give guys like Trajan, who has had nothing to do with what we've watched the last handful of years. I try to give him I try to look at it with a blank canvas, just like, okay, I'm not going to judge this person on what we've seen. Like, I can't just be negative because of what we've had to see. Yeah. I do agree with you. And I think a lot of Pistons fans, at least from the video we posted on Crunch Time, a lot of the comments were at least optimistic. And, he's younger. He's like 40-ish. And that's, I think the direction for the NBA is in sync with it all. And like we both kind of said, the overseas background. So I like it so far. But yeah, the number one move, I think all people would agree, you got to fire Troy Weaver. I think that would let everyone know, okay, he's He's not as some would say, a puppet. He's here to make moves and improve this team.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against Troy Weaver. I think this is probably the most talent that the Detroit Pistons have had in my fandom, and I'm 32 years old. They've never had this much young talent in my fandom. There's tons of potential with all of these guys since 2020. But to your point, yeah, like blank canvas, get rid of Weaver. If you want to, get rid of Monty. If you want to, because there are reports out that, the Pistons are open. Tom Gores is open to firing Monty, and that goes into our next segment. So James Edwards had it in his piece, and he's been very vocal about this, and I want to give him credit. He is a friend of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for the past 2 months, he said, I don't know if Monty Williams is going to be back next season. I just don't, given who the president of basketball operations is. He said it depends who it's going to be. But I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think it would be a sound decision to let Monty go and bring in a new coach?
So I'll start with this. The fact that Tom is okay with having Monty, or at least Tom is okay with eating that contract, to me, that is kudos. That he just made him the highest paid coach. And he's like, hey, if we need to eat this contract, I'm cool with it. It kind of says, and again, not saying Tom is a perfect human being by any means. There's a lot of things you can say, but at least there's that. He wants to win. You can make a case, I think, Anthony, that, you could fire him. I wouldn't, if I woke up and read the report the Pistons have fired Monty, I'm not going to be outraged. I just don't think, at least with the sample size you have, there's a bigger sample size with Troy, and there's more red flags to me. We all know Monty, what he's excelled in coaching is having veterans and having guys. I mean, you saw the success when they brought in Chris Paul, and I know Chris is kind of like an extension on the court of a coach, so maybe that hinders him a little bit. But I would not fire Monty. That is something, if you're asking me, it's not on my first 3 things that Trajan should do, but I wouldn't be upset, if that makes sense. So to answer the question, no, I don't think you should fire Monty. I don't think that would be. I think for Monty, you got to give him older players, you got to give him veterans, a little more talent, and I think so far, I know the first year was very rocky, but I think you have to give him at least 2 to 3 seasons to see where this thing goes, if there's improvement. And at that point, you can make a decision. But after year 1, no, I would say don't fire Monty Williams.
What was really kind of like a red flag, and I know Kenneth Clay said it in the chat, either Troy or Monty did exit interviews, and that's a red flag. And Tom Gores, I think we both read that Athletic thing where he's like, we have to change. We have to make changes. Nothing is off the table. And for Tom Gores to basically make him the highest paid coach at the time and to say, okay, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe this isn't the coach for the Pistons right now. And I've been very vocal about this. I think Monty is a good coach, but I think Monty is a good coach for a veteran team. Like, I thought the Milwaukee Bucks job, very attractive for him. You get Giannis and Dame. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. Even the Philly job, to an extent, veteran team. I think this team right now needs more of a development coach. They need more of younger juices, younger blood in the building. Nothing against Monty. I think he's a good coach. I do. But the mismanagement of Jaden Ivey this year was really weird. Playing Killian Hayes a majority of the season when, he's not going to be here. Obviously, they cut him. I honestly think I wouldn't rule it out. I think there's a strong probability that Tom Gores just eats that $60 million. I really do, because the guy's worth like $7 billion. $60 million to him isn't anything. He wipes his ass with hundreds. Like, come on. If he wants.
I was going to say, to your point, if you're going to go the fire Monty route, I think the argument, and you've already kind of made it, you look at what the Thunder have done, and the Jazz, another team with young coaches. That is where the league is heading. Like, I understand that completely. And trust me, I had to endure a lot of Pistons games this year. And yeah, Monty, it's frustrating. Like, I completely understand that. I just think, I think that's a fair argument. If you're going with he works better with older players, I 100% agree with that. So if this roster is going to get younger, then yeah, it probably doesn't make sense. I see more issues with this team, at least from a roster construction perspective, than probably coaching. But again, I could be wrong there too. So, like I said, I wouldn't be upset if they fired him, but I'm more focused on how do we build this roster correctly around Cade. I think that the construction has been where I've been most frustrated with, and that's just speaking from my experience. But again, I understand the frustration with Monty. Of course, I mean, you won 14 games. Like, yeah, I understand it. I do.
No, I think what you said is another, argument. It's another, you could go down that road, because I think roster construction, you're right, it's a complete mess. There are players that don't fit with each other. There are players that can't space the floor. They're talented. They have potential, but they don't fit around your franchise player in Cade Cunningham. And if you want to just kind of wipe that in the, the rearview mirror and say like, hey, like we got to get this roster right before we're worrying about the coach. That's an argument that you can take, and I respect that. I just think, like you said, like you look at the Thunder coach, you look at the Jazz head coach. You even look at like the Cavs are looking to hire Kenny Atkinson, who's did a really good job in Brooklyn. And you know what? Trajan Langdon was in Brooklyn when Kenny Atkinson was there. So maybe you can kind of connect the dots. You never really know. But I ultimately think that there is a good chance that Monty doesn't get let go. If he has the type of season that he did again, going into next season, like, we're 10 wins in December. Yeah, he's probably gone.
Yeah, I think a true X's and O's. If you're gonna fire Monty, bring in someone that just excels at X's and O's, and I think that's where the Jazz and Thunder, especially, you look at those teams and you're like, okay, yeah, schematically even though the Utah Jazz are in a rebuild, but still, you watch them and you're like, okay, they're well coached. You could see that from watching games. It just, for me, it's harder when you're watching the Pistons, even though, yes, there are things that Monty does wrong. I'm not saying he's perfect. There's tons of things. Their rotation, using players correctly, X's and O's, schematically, there's problems. Like, I do. I understand that. For me, though, I'm curious, and this is something I was going to bring up to you, and it's something that I made some videos on for Crunch Time. We've talked about it, is the New Orleans Pelicans, Trajan Langdon, the connection there. How does that work with potentially a Brandon Ingram being available, and do the Pistons even have enough assets to go get him? And is it worth it? If you have to package, the 5th overall pick with a player, is getting Brandon Ingram going to solve at least a fraction of your problems? And honestly, I would say yes, because they need someone like Brandon, but does he solve everything? No. So there's that too. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Oh, yeah, we can get into that for sure. I've talked with Corey about this because I want to give Corey credit. Corey has been on the Brandon Ingram trade probably since last October. Want to give him his flowers there and his credit. I would say that the Pistons do have enough, and I'll explain why. If you look at the Pelicans' cap space and you look at the lack of center depth, they've been reportedly high on Isaiah Stewart since the 2020 NBA draft. They tried to trade up and get him. The Pistons said no thanks. They tried to trade for him this year. The Pistons again said no thanks. I honestly believe that if you want to offer, now this is just me saying, like, players that you could offer for Brandon Ingram if you want to get the ball rolling: Isaiah Stewart, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. I think those are the types of players that the Pelicans would want. Jaden Ivey, I'll explain why they would want a guy like Jaden Ivey. They don't have a point guard, Jeff.
Right.
CJ McCollum runs the show. CJ McCollum is more of just a movement shooting guard. I think a Jaden Ivey and CJ McCollum, backcourt would be fun for New Orleans. Jalen Duren, why would that work? They need a center. They need a center that's on a rookie deal. They need a center that's on a cheap contract, because if you look at their salary cap, they're paying Zion. They're paying CJ McCollum. They want to do a rookie extension with Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, probably. Jalen Duren's on a rookie scale contract. So if you want to get Brandon Ingram, those are the types of players that you're probably going to have to deal. And I know some fans have a lot of attachment towards all those players that I named. But if you want to get better players on this team, you're going to have to say goodbye to some of the guys that we've drafted in the lottery over the past 4 seasons.
Yeah, and it comes down to, again, to kind of go back to the roster construction thing, I like a Cade and Brandon Ingram 1-2 punch. I think they fit better. if you're talking about strictly just fit at this point in time, then probably Ivy and Cade. Even though you'd like to see more of a sample size, but you cannot deny getting a guy like Brandon Ingram, who's a 20-plus point scorer, who's shooting close to 40% for three in his career off like 3+ attempts. And he's immediately someone who could play on the wing for you and get you. And him and Cade, I think, even Brandon Ingram in terms of his playmaking, he's a little underrated too. So I like the fit there. Ivy, I wouldn't. And to your point about who you'd give up, I think it makes sense. I would keep Duren personally, and then you deal Ivy and throw in assets, whatever it is, draft capital, throw in the 5th overall pick. And I know it seems expensive, but you have to think where you are. You're going to have to significantly overpay for a Brandon Ingram in free agency. So if you have an opportunity to acquire him via trade, like you said, you're going to have to, unfortunately, get rid of some of the players that are kind of homegrown. But again, I think Brandon Ingram with some free agency signings, you add some more shooting. I like it. And I think that it does improve this roster pretty significantly, in my opinion. Even though the whole thing about Brandon Ingram, and I see people say this, like, oh, he's never healthy. Like, he misses about like 20 games a year. Yes, that's a fair argument, but you can't deny when he was healthy. I mean, 2 years ago, when the Pelicans, not this past season, but a couple years ago when they made the playoffs, dude was averaging like 27 in the postseason. Like, Brandon Ingram's a bucket. I mean, and he's efficient. He's like close to 50% from the field and 40 from three. So I love the fit. And I think ideally that's how you get a step closer to building this roster correctly around your franchise player, Cade Cunningham. So I'm all aboard.
And I also think, to that argument, I think he would have career highs across the board. I don't know what it is. Seems like every time we get a player, whether it's in free agency or trade, they have like career years. Like Blake Griffin, when he got traded here, had his best statistical career in a Detroit Pistons uniform. I think Brandon Ingram and a Cade Cunningham together, that could be a whole lot of fun. But again, it depends what the package is. It depends what you have to give up. If you can get him without giving up a whole lot, then sure, do it. But I think he's going to have a whole lot of suitors out there. Teams like the Lakers, teams like the Hawks. There's just a lot of teams that need one of the best underrated small forwards, in my opinion. They can get his own shot, score at all three levels. I think the Pistons can get him, but it depends how much are you willing to give up, and are you going to extend him to a $200 million contract right after you trade for him? That's another thing you have to ask yourself. Is he worth that 35 to 40 million that he's probably going to command with a new contract that the Pelicans just do not want to give him?
Yeah, and I think the argument that I will listen to is the inability to play a full season, which is fair. I understand that. But in terms of immediate impact players, dude, to me, he is the one. And I think he complements, if you have him and Assar, like again, this is a team that was one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Now, you look at the Magic, I think they're bottom of the league in 3-point attempts and makes, but they defend better. They're better in every area. They turn the ball over less. Schematically, they're better. So they won, close to 50 games this year. So it's not just shooting. There's a lot of things you have to solve. And I think Brandon Ingram, like you said, a 3-level scorer, a pretty efficient scorer, I think that solves, a lot of immediate issues. But like you said, like it comes down to, you want to give him, $200+ million. Not that the Pistons are in a position to, turn away talent, but I don't know if fans can handle, hitting the reset button, or at least close to that with this long rebuild process. I don't know. I think you're getting to a point where you're going to have to trade Ivy, unfortunately. And I do. I'm a fan. When he was first drafted, I really did envision a Cade and Jaden Ivey backcourt. But the problem is, the farther the Mavs make in the playoffs, you're looking at how they play and you're thinking, okay, Kyrie Irving's basically, he's one of the best ball handlers, one of the most craftiest scorers of all time. But he's basically a 2-guard. I mean, he's a 50, 40, 90 guy. Like, can Ivy ever be no, he can't. I'm sorry. Like how efficient Kyrie Irving is, that's what makes that thing work, and how great Luka is. I just don't see that. That's the pathway for having a backcourt. If you want to have one of the best backcourts in the league, and I just don't have faith that Ivy, he can be a terrific player, but I'm talking about just playing off of Cade, those two being able to share the backcourt together. I just don't see a pathway where that can work at this point. So I think Ivy's the odd one out. I like Duren. The shot blocking, at least from last year, I was disappointed. I think there's, especially with how athletic he is, and the ankle injuries concern me, but I'm still bought in on Duren. I think he could be a really good player. And I like a Cade, Brandon Ingram, Assar, Duren. I like that in some free agents. I like that better than what they currently have. I will say that. Drafting someone at 5th overall and being like, all right, sign some free agents. Let's keep it pushing. Like, no, I'm cool. I want to add talent. I want to build this thing. You got to sell something to Cade. I mean,
Yeah,
you do. And it kind of goes back into the point earlier when we're talking about head coach. And I saw someone brought it up in the chat too about having multiple head coaches for Cade Cunningham. I just want to build this roster the correct way, and you got to get him scores, and you got to get him spacing. You got to get him some shooters, and they can do that in free agency. But Brandon Ingram brings a lot more to the table, in my opinion. But $200 million is a lot. I will admit, it's a shit ton of money.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I personally think that if the Pistons were to trade Duren, I'm telling you right now, a lot of fans, and I understand it, would be so pissed off.
Absolutely.
Because you see the potential. Like, if he unlocks it on both sides, that's easily a top 10 center in the NBA. Obviously, this season, there were flashes where you saw what he could become. But again, the ankle injuries, like he's had 10 NBA injuries and 8 of them have been ankles. And he started wearing ankle braces, which I'm really happy for because, when a big man has ankle injuries like that, that's such a red flag. And, since he did wear those ankle braces, he didn't hurt his ankles for the remainder of the season. But I think he'll get better. I think the one thing, I know we're going kind of off topic with this. I think the one thing that the Pistons made a big mistake with was they didn't get Jalen Duren a vet soon enough in his career. Like we saw Taj Gibson towards the end. They should have got a vet last summer to work with James Wiseman, to work with Jalen Duren, because I think a veteran presence is what has been missing on this, young rebuilding team over the past couple of years. Like you need an impactful vet to really, hype these guys up, help them in areas that maybe, they need more help on. I'm still very high on Jalen Duren. I know some people aren't in the community, and I understand it, obviously, because he kind of had an up and down year. But I'll just say, like, if they trade Jalen Duren in a Brandon Ingram package, I know Pistons fans would be extremely upset.
Yeah, I know they would. And I like Jalen Duren's potential. I mean, to the Taj Gibson point, I mean, who would have thought that a 10-day contract could affect him as much as it did? It really speaks to team building 101. When you have young players that have a lot of potential, you sign guys that can offer – kind of a mentorship in a way. And even Monte Morris hit the eject button before his first season was over. So, there's that too. So yeah, I'm with you. I think again, it goes back to the roster construction thing, and to kind of speak more on the Ivy and Cade, the backcourt there, it reminds me, it's kind of what the Kings had to go through, even though they traded Tyrese very prematurely, and everyone would admit that. But when you think about where the Kings are with Domantas Sabonis, and how they're with Mike Brown, also got to give a lot of credit to him, but how different their roster is. They made some great free agency moves. Like Tyrese is thriving in Indy, no doubt about it. He's one of the best point guards in the NBA. And you probably look back and you don't make that trade. But at the time, look at what the Kings and look at their projection and how much better they got because of, again, I think the fit there with De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese, initially, they're like, okay, we got to trade one of these players. We're keeping De'Aaron Fox. But it worked out for them. Now, some would argue no, because Tyrese is that caliber of player, but at least with Sabonis, it brought them talent immediately that could fit around their franchise player in De'Aaron Fox. So there's multiple angles to look at it. I'm to go back to Duren. I still believe in Jalen Duren. I think the injuries do concern me, but again, there's players on this team. I mean, even Cade to a certain degree. I mean, I'm still skeptical, even though I love Cade. He's a franchise player, but staying healthy is something that does worry me every single year with him. So I'm not out on Jalen Duren yet. I just think defensively, his rim protection has to be to where we all thought it would be coming out of college. Like, I think he can be one of the best rim protectors in the NBA. And last year it was such a significant step back. It was disappointing, but I love the potential there with Jalen Duren. I think there's plenty more untapped potential with him, but we shall see.
Same here. Yeah, I know we just went on went left field with the Duren stuff, and absolutely love that, man. Like, I get sidetracked so easily, especially if I don't take a CBD gummy. My ADD just goes in left field. I'm like, oh, how about that? But before we do jump into the next segment, this podcast is sponsored by Game Time, and we have to hear from our sponsors. I have to tell you guys about the Game Time ticket app. How exciting would it be to attend an NBA Finals game this year? I think I would absolutely love it. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. One of my favorite features within the app is they have a 360-degree view, so you get to see how close you'll be getting to the action. I did that several times this year buying Detroit Pistons tickets, and I got to see whether I was in an upper bowl, lower bowl, or almost courtside. Absolutely love that feature within the app. If you go over and you download the Game Time app and create an account and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time today. Last minute ticket deals, lowest price guaranteed. All right.
Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Yeah.
We appreciate Game Time for sponsoring today's podcast. Now, it is the summer and the NBA season's over, and you're texting me earlier. You were watching some NBA draft prospects. So my question to you, which prospects does Jeff like at 5 right now?
Okay, so very few. I'll keep it short. I think this draft as a whole is a little underwhelming. And of course, it's on brand. The last 3 years, they've had the 5th overall pick. And I think this draft, even though people say that often, it's like, oh, this draft is super underwhelming. But then you find out there's 3 to 4 really good players from it. So I get that point. But my overall reaction, and I did something for Bleacher Report as well, reacting to the draft. I did it with Brandon Dent, shout out to him. And we were extremely disappointed, obviously. But when you look at it, I think there'll be some players in the top 10. And that's also the positive of an underwhelming draft. There's no clear number one player, even though SARS is going to be, I think, a really good player. But he's going to probably go number one. But when you look at the other guys that could potentially fall, and you think, okay, I think there could be some diamonds in the rough. I know the fan, at least the guy that I think causes the most noise is Modest Berzelis. And I think him as a player on paper works. I think the 6'9" frame, the upside with his shooting, I know that's still a concern, but you look back at high school, he was a 40-something% three-point shooter. So I think there's something there. And he's got a little bit of that dog in him too defensively. He's a good rim protector. So, hey, if they stay put at 5 and you take Berzelis, it's not a pick that I think people are going to be jumping up and down about, but I think it'd be a good pick. It's like, okay, you got Berzelis. I think he fits well with who they have currently. But a player that I'm intrigued by, even though I'm not completely sold on, just in terms of like potential, it's probably just the cop-out pick. And I don't think Trajan's going to do this based on his track record and what he said, is Dalton Connect. Like, that dude can shoot the hell out of the ball. Absolutely. Now, he can't stop a nosebleed on defense. It's fair. But you look at his shooting ability, you can't help but be like, okay, this guy with who they currently have, if they don't trade away Ivy and they keep the core together, that's the spacing that, but you can also argue you can get some shooting in free agency. But I like Dalton Connect a lot. I know he's a little older, which is always a turnoff. But sometimes, guys, when you look at upside, when you're always taking upside, sometimes you just want to know you're getting a solid player, someone who can play in this league for a long time. And I think Dalton Connect can do that. And he comes out of the draft with a lot of tools. You're not waiting for him to develop into, can he improve this? Can he improve? You know what you're getting. You're getting an absolute sharpshooter. So I'm open to Dalton Connect, but I think, Modest is someone that kind of fits the mold for a Trajan Langdon pick, in my opinion. And who's going to be there? There's a couple players, I think, and I saw you mention Ron Holland, and I like Ron Holland. I think in terms of having another wing who can be an absolute menace defensively, you look back at his high school track record too. I believe he's a number one player coming out. So he's got a prestigious track record. But again, to me, it's like going back to the spacing thing. That does concern me with Ron Holland. He reminds me, even though I think he will be better because I like his resume a little more, but he's basically like another Assar in my opinion. Like you're getting another really good defensive wing, absolutely really good defensively, But the shot, it's like, can he develop it? And his free throw shooting isn't great, which is another concern for me when you look at a guy who potentially grow as a shooter. So Modest, I'm okay with. I'm comfortable with the pick. And I think that's probably the favorite, in my opinion, to be a Piston. But Dalton Connect is kind of that, the sleeper where I'm like, okay, I'm intrigued because of how well he could shoot the basketball, especially with Cade and Jaden Ivey, with those two guys.
Yeah, so I liked Ron Holland, given if Troy Weaver was still here, because it seems like a Troy guy, right? But I know we said at the top of the podcast, we both think he's going to be good. I honestly think offensively, if you want to draft a guy that's going to contribute and help this team, there are two prospects in the top 5 that you could possibly draft. You said the first guy, Dalton Connect out of Tennessee, 23 years old, probably the most NBA-ready prospect that's going to be drafted in the lottery. He could average 10 points right now in the NBA.
Right.
Just his offensive versatility, scoring at all 3 levels, kind of reminds you of like a Tyler Hero in a sense. Just his athleticism, I think, is something that a lot of Pistons fans are intrigued by. But again, given who the president is and him talking about potential and skill set, I don't really know if they would draft Dalton Connect at 5. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong, and they take Dalton Connect. I can get clipped and look like a jackass. It's happened before, and I'm sure it won't stop. The other guy is Reed Shepherd out of Kentucky. I think if you're looking for shooting, you're looking for an elite skill, and someone that fits next to Cade Cunningham floor spacing wise, Reed Shepherd makes a whole lot of sense for the Detroit Pistons. His combine, I think he had the highest vertical out of anyone there. He had like the highest, it was like a 40-inch vertical. I think Reed Shepherd makes a whole lot of sense for the Pistons if they want to go offensively. They're banking on potential. You said it earlier. Modest Bazelis has probably the most potential, and if he hits his ceiling, he could become a two-way monster. Like if his shot is more consistent, if he can knock down a 3-point shot, around the 30-35%, then yeah, Modest Bazelis could be a hell of a pick. I mean, there's also guys like Ron Dillingham that I've seen just fall amongst off a cliff, and you have point guards like Nikola Topic and Stefan Castle be consensus top 5 picks. I mean, I think there's a lot of routes the Pistons could go in. I ultimately think they're going to trade down in the draft and try to target a guy maybe like a Cody Williams or maybe a TJ Salong out of France. I really do. I think that's more of the type of players that they would probably target. But that's just my gut feeling right now, and we're in May. That could completely change in a month.
Yeah, and to your Cody Williams point, that is another guy that if you're trading back, I'm comfortable with. But I just, again, no one's blind to the fact of what the Pistons need. You need a wing, ideally who can play next to Jalen Duren. I think Modest does. He fits that description. He can play next to Duren. He can provide spacing. I think, like I said, the rim protection's intriguing. He's really good in transition. This team wasn't great in transition at all last year. So I think there's a lot of things he can come and help out with. And, you look at how he's transitioned into the G League Ignite, even though the shooting, the 3-point shot it did the percentage wise, it wasn't great. But you look back at some of the shots he hit that last season, it was like must-have shots, shot clock ticking down. He's got the ball. He's creating his own shot. He's sizing up wings on the perimeter as a 6'9", power forward, small forward. Like I think in terms of potential, Modest, I think personally, and again, it is May, but in terms of what Trajan's looking for, that dude just fits like exactly what he's looking for, in my opinion. But hey, I think the Dalton Connect thing, it's more about intrigue. And I think the shooting, like you said, he's the most NBA ready guy. And depending on how some GMs view the NBA draft, I don't think Trajan views it like this, but if you can get a guy who can contribute right away, especially to a roster that won 14 games, like maybe you're on board with that. But I think it's going to be a potential, and you could probably trade back and still get a pretty good value for a player. I think this draft, you could argue that. So I'm cool with trading back and getting more assets. I'm comfortable with that 100%.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued with Cody Williams. My only question is, can he hit 3-pointers at a higher volume? Because if you look at his numbers in Colorado, like he hit 3-pointers, but he didn't take a whole lot of them. And that wingspan does really intrigue me of just being a guy that can switch with Assar. And I don't know why people aren't as high on him. Maybe it's because of the frame, maybe his ability not to get to the basket, like other prospects, other small forward prospects. But hey, man, I happen to like Cody Williams, and maybe I picked my favorite already. I don't even know it.
That's one thing when I went back, and I did this a couple weeks ago, kind of preparing more for the lottery. One thing I did notice, and you brought it up with Cody, is the 3-point attempts. Yeah, I think he'd be like 1 for 2. Like the percentage looked great, but when you actually look back, it wasn't a high volume. Which, like, ideally, you want someone that's comfortable attempting 5 to 7 threes. If you're good, because the Pistons do need 3-and-D players. I mean, let's just be real. They need 3-and-D players. Obviously, it depends on what player you're talking about. If he's 6'9", yes, there's rim protection upside, which would be great. But I think any player that fits that description with high upside, I am completely comfortable with. I just think any player that, not just 3-point percentage, but especially free throw percentage. Like if he's a project in terms of shooting the ball, like that's where I'm like, damn, okay. Pistons don't need any more of those types of players, in my opinion. And I get there's some players that you just grab because of the potential. But this team just desperately needs guys who just already have a formidable jump shot and can be consistent. Yeah. And I do believe in Modest's ability to do that. I do.
Yeah. But, we could just, draft Dalton Connect and we both look like jackasses. I'm here for it. If you want an NBA ready guy, go for Absolutely. It. Get a guy that Cade's more comfortable with and he doesn't have to worry about the lane being clogged because nobody can shoot around him. I mean, go for it. I'm not a GM, and I'm glad I'm not because I'd probably be fired in a year. Yeah. Honestly.
Yeah. That's why we do these podcasts. Yeah.
I do not envy any GMs like Troy Weaver out there. I really don't. Mm-hmm. I did want to stay with NBA draft. I don't know if you saw, but this is some, housekeeping news because there are Pistons fans that are very high on this guy. So Stefan Castle said he won't talk to teams with starting established point guards already. Now, I know there are some Pistons fans that like the idea of a Stefan Castle. I personally think, and this is just my opinion, I think he's trying to force his way to San Antonio because San Antonio is at 4 and they have the 8th pick. So if they want Nicole Topic or Stefan Castle, they could probably get their point guard with Victor Wembanyama. But after kind of hearing that, what are your initial thoughts of him saying, I don't want to go to a team like the Pistons that have ideally like 2 starting caliber guards?
I actually love this. I know when people see this, they're like, what? A guy who hasn't even been drafted yet trying to dictate where he goes. Listen, the NBA is a player empowerment league. And if I'm Stefan Castle and I know what I can be, like, yeah, I'm all for players dictating their futures, especially when guys that don't say anything and try to do all the right things end up in a situation where they can't thrive. That happens pretty often in the NBA and all across sports. So yeah, who wouldn't want to play with Victor Wembanyama? And I think Castle is a perfect fit, even though I think the biggest thing with Castle, you bring up, go back to the jump shot thing, but as a player, I like Stefan Castle. You watched him at college basketball, you watch March Madness, like the guy can play. So I have no problem with this. If I'm a player, even if this didn't come directly from him, maybe his agent's like, listen, I wouldn't hate it if he said this because ideally you want to be in the best situation. Yeah, hell yeah. Control your own destiny. And if it means playing with Victor Wembanyama, yeah, there's a lot of players that would love to do that. He's a hell of a player. And if you're a point guard, my goodness. I'm curious still, the Spurs, at least with the Trae Young rumors, I don't know how realistic that is, but hey, maybe he gets drafted there and something changes. I don't know. But I love this from Stefan Castle. I have no problem with this.
I'll give you a hot take. I think Darius Garland is a Spur.
That's something I've been seeing more of too, Darius Garland being moved. So.
I think they trade 4 and 8 for Darius Garland and a salary filler. I really do. I don't know what the Cavs are doing. I don't know if they want to keep Donovan Mitchell. I don't know what's going to happen with Jared Allen. They've made the playoffs, but they keep getting bounced. So obviously they feel like they have to make some kind of roster shakeup. But doesn't really surprise me. Stefan Castle wants to go where there's no competition, where he has to fight for his spot because he's a national champion. Probably one of the better defenders in this draft class. He's just got that dog in him. He just does. Like I love watching him play in the March Madness tournament. I'm not surprised UConn won. Really well. He was really well coached too. Like I'd love Dan Hurley coaching the Pistons. And I'm going off topic, but like Honestly,
Yeah, real quick too. If you're Stefan Castle and you see what DeJounte Murray turned into with the San Antonio Spurs, what kind of player he developed into in terms of a player development, yeah, hell yeah. If I'm Stefan Castle as a point guard, that is like any point guard's dream to end up in San Antonio right now. With not only their ability to develop players, but the players they do have, the player they do have, at least from a point guard perspective, like, yeah, hell yeah. He's a terrible fit for the Pistons, in my opinion, but hey, for the Spurs, he's perfect.
Yeah, I think the only way he would be a good fit for the Pistons is if they just like got like a bunch of free agents that we're going to talk about later. There's one in particular that I want to talk to you about because there's like kind of like a salary figure that what he's expecting. But yeah, I think the Spurs good fit, Pistons bad fit, no spacing. I feel like freaking, Craig Monroe, Andre Drummond, Josh Smith spacing days, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, hopefully never again. But
no, I mean we did it this season, but hey.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Pistons, this week we saw, the awards out, Defensive Player of the Year, and we had the all rookie teams.
Mm-hmm.
Assar Thompson and Marcus Sasser didn't make all NBA rookie selections. So I want to ask you, do you feel like Assar and Marcus were snubbed from these selections?
No. Okay. This is what's frustrating me. And I'll honestly, real quick, to vent about Assar Thompson, from how he started to how he finished, and I don't think that it's all his fault. I do think, yeah, there's accountability, but man, Monty Williams did that man so dirty, in my opinion. Assar Thompson should have been let completely off the leash, and you should have been able to give that man as many minutes as he needed to develop. And that's why it's hard to say, was he snubbed? No. But I think the reason why he's not on there is because of what happened this year. And I don't know the backstory, but that is frustrating. To bring up something that is frustrating about Monty Williams, yeah, the Assar Thompson storyline, along with the Ivy stuff, that was frustrating. Now, Marcus, I think in spurts, there was stretches of basketball where you're like, oh yeah, this guy is an all rookie. He deserves to be a selection, but like, I just didn't think these guys were able to fully, like, I didn't see these guys, at least from how the season ended from when it started, because their timelines are very different. Like Assar at the beginning had more of a leash, and then at the end it was like he was pulled in and they, Monty did him dirty. Marcus was kind of the opposite, where later in the season he was allowed to develop more. So I would say no. I don't think they should have made the all rookie team, but I do think they're great players. I think they can be really good players. I don't think making an all rookie team determines the career outcome for these guys. Like I'm excited for both. I think Marcus Sasser is going to be a great backup point guard, and I think Assar Thompson can be for sure a small forward. The jump shot a little concerning, but I like him as a player. I just think Monty should have continued to let that man have more freedom for the entirety of the season. Like, dude, you won 14 games. You should allow Assar to just make mistakes and continue to play. You could argue that for Ivy too at the beginning, but no, but I'm still excited for both these guys. I think they're going to be great players.
Yeah, to your point, benching Assar when he was almost averaging a double-double and getting like a steal and a block a game. I think he was like second in rebounds behind Duran, and he was like 6'6", 6'7". It was like Dennis Rodman-esque, and he was locking down the best player. I don't know what happened. I really don't. I think it's Isaiah Livers got healthy, and then like we didn't see him. Honestly, I much would rather sub in Assar for Livers, because Livers wasn't hitting any shots anyways. As for Marcus, he had certain games, and I still remember the game vividly. Against the Milwaukee Bucks, I thought we were going to beat the Bucks. Marcus Sasser went freaking berserk.
He's a bucket.
Went, toe to toe with Damian Lillard, and just like I think he had close to 30 points in that game. He had moments this season where he had like 20 points, 15 points, and just like a sniper from three. Now, I do think Assar should have made an all-rookie selection. I do. But I do believe part of the reason why he didn't was because of playing time.
Yes.
And that has to do with rotations and coaching. I do think Assar Thompson one day is going to be in defensive player of the year conversations. I'll just say that. Like, if you don't make the all rookie team, but you win a couple, defensive player of the years, we need a new one because Rudy Gobert gets them every year, and I don't understand why.
Well, then you last 3-4 seconds of the ball game, at least on the perimeter, you see how much Rudy Gobert's taken advantage of. I mean, you saw it on Jaden McDaniels' face when
he knew it
an island with Luka Doncic. But yeah, in terms of his potential defensively, I'm with you. Dude, he was, as a rookie, already, in my opinion, their best perimeter defender. I know there's a lot more that comes with that as being able to contribute and play a lot of minutes. I think he should have just been let loose the entire year, allow him to make mistakes. And I'm with you. If you would have been able, if he had the same leeway he did at the beginning of the season, I think he would have been on an all rookie team. And I don't know the story behind the scenes. I mean, you talked to the beat writers about that, but he has potential, man. I mean, you look at his brother. It was kind of the opposite. Like at the beginning of the season, he was getting healthy, developing, and then towards the end of the season, like his brother started breaking out. It was almost like the polar opposite with Assar and Amin. Like Amin at the end of the season was showing out, and Assar showed out, and then proceeded to kind of be pulled back. It didn't make a lot of sense. So I'm still very high on Assar Thompson, man. He is. I'm with you in terms of a defensive player. That dude can give you, 3-4 stocks a game. He is an absolute animal. So I love it. If he gets a jump shot, watch out. That dude is going to be – and I know we say that with a lot of players, by the way. If he gets a jump shot, if this guy gets a jump shot. But I think with Assar, yeah, absolutely. He's a walking double-double, like you said, at 6'7".
I honestly think he will get a jump shot, just the type of workhorse that he is. And just dude, his basketball IQ and just his IQ of the game, like, he's so intelligent. It's actually kind of scary. Like, he's really quiet and reserved, but, like, he can name players from like the 80s. I was just like, dude, what? Like, how are you doing that? Like, it's insane. But I'm not really too mad about the all rookie selections. I know some Pistons fans were, Detroit versus everybody, but more like, Monty Williams versus rotations and all bench lineups versus everybody.
It's Monty versus everybody.
It's literally.
Yeah.
Oh man. I did want to talk about free agency. I don't know how far you've gone into free agency, maybe guys that you like. There's one guy that I've been very vocal on, and I think when you look at him, he makes sense for the Detroit Pistons. He makes sense in terms of the type of players that I think they need, and that's Malik Monk. Mm-hmm. So there was a report earlier this week that Malik Monk could command $25 million per year. So my question to you, Jeff, are you willing to pay a guy like Malik Monk $25 million a year to come to Detroit?
Okay, so there's a lot of angles. I'll start with this. Before we even get into Malik Monk, you're going to have to overpay for anybody to come to Detroit. So I know from like, if someone like me who's been an NBA fan my entire life, you look at some of these contracts and we always think in our mind, does he deserve this money? But it's not always the case. It's this player going to Detroit, going to this team. Should he get this money? And I think for at least what he brings, oh yeah. I think here's the thing you have to think. Okay, well, does Malik Monk bring spacing? Does he bring somebody who can come off your bench and give you look at what he did with the Kings? Like, yeah, there's value with that. 25 is a lot of money. Okay. I understand that. It's a shit ton of money. And I know a lot of people would say it's an overpay. There are probably players you can get to space the floor and not pay $25 million, to be completely fair. Even though if you're looking at starter level players, you're going to have to overpay for them regardless. But I want Malik Monk in Detroit. I think he'd be a great fit. 25, probably a little hefty. But like if he's one of your number one, number two, number three targets in free agency, and he's like, listen, I'll come to the Pistons, but you got to pay this amount. Maybe it's a shorter term deal, whatever it is. Then yeah, I mean, just pay him. I mean, you can't have $60 million in cap space and not do jack shit with it. Like there's that argument too. It's like you have cap space for a reason. You want to bring talent. You want to bring talent to the Pistons. You're going to have to overpay, unfortunately. So, like, we got to get that out of our head as well. So, I'm comfortable with it. I'm not in love with 25 per year to Malik Monk, Anthony. But at the end of the day, it's like if you want good basketball players, you're going to have to pay. So that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think if you don't want to go with Monk, I think there are other shooting guards like Buddy Hield, who's a little bit older, but he's shown that he's a very consistent three-point shooter. Obviously, if you did watch the 76ers in the playoffs, he didn't really have the best performance, but I still think that Buddy Hield would be a really good fit in Detroit. You also have guys that are a little bit younger. Gary Trent Jr., who I've been incredibly high on. Seems like every time the Raptors came to town, he would torch the Pistons for whatever reason. I don't know. It's like a revenge game. I think those are other shooting guards that you could target. I'm not even going to mention Klay Thompson. I would not overpay for a Klay Thompson if I'm the Pistons. Let Orlando do that. Let Philly do that. Just kind of pass on the Klay Thompson experience. Or maybe you go wild and you say, hey, Dwayne Casey's in the front office. Come to Detroit. Who knows? But I do think they are going to upgrade that shooting guard position. I think there are some options out there that the Pistons could go down. I just kind of think Malik Monk checks a lot of boxes. So if you were to give him, I don't know, 2 for, 50, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But
yeah.
Who knows if he wants to stay? He might want like a 4 for 100. I personally don't think he's going to stay in Sacramento, even though there is a connection there with him and De'Aaron Fox. I think it's a chance for him to get the bag. Maybe he goes back to the team that drafted him in Charlotte. You never really know.
And I'm with you, by the way. I want to respond to your Gary Trent Jr. You brought him up. I think he's also a really good fit. I think, and I don't know what Gary Trent Jr. would command. And if he's commanding a little less than Malik Monk, I would rather have Gary Trent Jr. I think the shooting is there. Takes a lot of threes. He can make them. He's a formidable defender. Like, I think he fits. That, you see a common theme with the players we're bringing up here. Like, two guards that can space the floor. Obviously, the taller they are, the more intrigued I am because of the versatility there. But like, if it's Malik Monk, Buddy Hield, I'd be okay with, but I'm comfortable with it. But defensively, there's probably some problems there. But shooting is the number one priority to me. And if you're getting it in Buddy Hield, Malik Monk, or Gary Trent Jr., Anthony, I'm on board. I'm comfortable with it. I'm curious what a price point for Gary Trent Jr. would be. That would probably be my question.
I could see like 15 to like 20 personally.
See, I would rather pay 15 to 20 for him, if I'm being honest, than Malik Monk, 25.
Yeah, I think when you look at Gary Trent, I know some people are like, well, he's inconsistent. Well, you kind of compare him and Buddy Hield. Their stats are damn near identical, and Gary Trent is a lot younger than Buddy Hield, so I would bank on his potential of getting better. But I did want to talk about Monk for a little bit because I know a lot of Pistons fans have been really vocal on him as a fit and just kind of that 6-man role that he did take with the Kings. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as Brandon Jennings saying that he's better than Donovan Mitchell, but I like him. I like him. Brandon Jennings, man. I love Brandon Jennings, but man, he says some crazy shit sometimes.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that was wild, by the way. I love Brandon Jennings as a personality, but that was blasphemy, to quote Stephen A. Smith. That's blasphemy right there. Absolutely.
Honestly, man. Did you, by chance, get to see the Ringer's latest article?
I did not.
Okay, so the Ringer had a next up list. And I'm going to see if I can try to share my screen with the rest of everybody. I got to open the article real quick. And basically, they had like this next up article. And let me see if I can share my screen real quick.
See, I like this. I can get behind this. Fits my narrative.
Yeah, hold on. Of course. Dude, I always have such a hard time with this. I don't know why.
I'm going to parlay, by the way, I'm already going to foreshadow what I'm going to do. I'm going to parlay this article into the trade Cade discussion, which I don't think is a big part of Pistons fans, but I'm excited. At least Cade's being recognized. I have this argument with Adam all the time about whether to trade Cade and start fresh or keep him. So I'm looking forward to this.
I love Adam, but he's a cat. He's a casual.
Yeah. Shout out to Adam.
Adam's a casual when it comes to basketball. I love him, but like I said, he's
Why you
texting me
like his,
about.
you don't like his DeMar DeRozan take, or you didn't bring DeMar DeRozan home, or
You know what, man? It's just like,
I gave him so much shit for that. I love him.
yeah, he got like all weird about like the Sabonis thing. And for whatever reason, StreamYard is not letting me share it. I don't know why, but go after yourself. But they had Cade Cunningham out of 25 players, which wasn't even like a top 25 ranking. I'll send you the article. It was just kind of like a top 30 ranking, but they had him as the 14th best player out of the 25 and under. Like they had like Jabari Smith Jr. at 25. They had Scotty Barnes ranked above him. When you kind of look at players that are under 25 and you look at a guy like Cade Cunningham, do you believe he's going to be in those conversations to where he's going to be talked about in all-star selections? He's going to be talked about as possibly a dark horse for MVP. Do you think Cade Cunningham could have that type of impact over the next couple of seasons in the NBA?
Okay, so and we have to understand what we're watching here with Anthony Edwards. There is levels, okay? Yeah. Anthony Edwards is already arguably the face of the NBA. Well, I mean, I know he's not playing well, at least the last couple of games, but at least for Anthony Edwards this postseason in general, this man is really making a name for himself. And look at what he's done to this franchise with the Timberwolves. Okay, that is like, to me, that is like the definition of a number one. He was a number one overall pick, just like Cade, but like someone that can turn everything around. Yeah, add talent around him. I mean, you have Jay McDaniels, one of the best perimeter defenders. You have Cat, you have Gobert, you have a good coach too, and you have a surrounding cast. Like that's what happens. Okay, I don't think Cade is going to be Anthony Edwards. Okay, and that's okay. But what I do think Cade can be is an all-star. I think he can lead your team to the playoffs. Is he a number one? Is he a number two? I don't think it's fair right now because you got to look at Cade's game. I think now you're seeing his ability to score at all three levels. And there's the health factor, staying healthy, which I think is a legitimate question. If you have questions about his ability to stay healthy, that's fair. I think his career is a little too, I want more of a sample size. I mean, he missed an entire season. He missed some games this year, and there's the vegan stuff that people say. But when you look at his talent, okay, he needs shooting. It's very clear with how he plays. I think he's not a bad shooter. I think he improved this season, at least with his jump shot. And I do think for his career, and you look at his development, a dude who can get you 22, 4 and 7, and have decent percentages. I know the turnovers were a big thing, but again, you got to look at the surrounding cast. Like this league, man, you can't just draft Cade and everything changes for you. Like there's only a handful of Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic's, who wasn't even taken number one, by the way. But like Cade is a very specific type of player. He needs help, like he does. But I think if you get Cade either number one or number two, you're getting a true running mate who's also an all-star, then you'll start to see what Cade can be. I think at this time, to determine whether he's a franchise player or not, from what I've seen, yeah, you build around that guy. He's one of the most talented players, at least the most talented player we've seen in quite some time here in Detroit that's been drafted. So that's already an argument. But the other argument is like, what are you going to trade Cade and try to find another Cade? Like, what's the argument here? I think Cade has all the tools to be an all-star, MVP, and so there's only a handful of guys that are. I mean, Luka doesn't even have an MVP, which is crazy. He's an MVP to me. But in terms of being an all-star, in terms of being, can he make an all-NBA team? Potentially. There's a lot of talent. I think it's the deepest league that we've seen in quite some time as time goes on. But I just think for building around him correctly, the Pistons have not been able to do that. So they need to be able to look at Cade, understand what his skill sets are, understand what his strengths are, and give this man as much spacing as possible and give him a running mate who can score the basketball and take pressure. He is on the worst team in basketball. He's getting double teamed consistently, and it's hard for him as it is to create offense when there's not offense that's feeding off what he can do. Right, you're like trying to create shots for players that can't knock shots down. I mean, look at what Fontecchio did, not just for the Pistons, but for Cade. To get a guy like that, who is a high volume, a great percentage 3-point shooter who can space the floor, look at how it affected Cade. I mean, and I hate doing this because it's always what ifs, but you put Cade on any other competent organization or competent roster that's built correctly, and then you'll see him flourish. I think what he's been given in Detroit, what he's had to work with, I think he's done more than what I've expected. Besides staying, the not being healthy is a concern. I get that. But everything else to me, Anthony, checks. I'm cool with Cade. To me, he's a franchise player. You keep him around long term, and you just build around him correctly. And the Pistons have not been able to do that. I blame Troy for that. But at the end of the day, Cade is. I think this is fair. Ranked as one of the best up-and-coming players, and what he can provide for any basketball team, dude, any franchise would love this. Will love this man. I'm thankful he's in Detroit. I hope he doesn't leave.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to sign that contract extension this summer. I'm just warning people now. It's going to be over $200 million. You're going to get the Woj tweet in a couple of months. He's going to sign it. He's going to be here for the foreseeable future. What I will say is, if Cade and Anthony Edwards switch places, I think you would see the type of player that Cade could possibly be. And a lot of people have mentioned, Anthony Edwards has Cat. He has Rudy Gobert. He has Jaden McDaniels. He has a competent coach. He has, a vet like they have vets like Mike Conley.
Yep.
Cade doesn't have any of that. Cade doesn't, like, the second best player on the Detroit Pistons right now. I mean, you could have a debate with that, but I think in terms of just pure offense, it's Fontecchio. And that's not saying anything bad about Fontecchio. Fontecchio is a hell of a player, but
right.
The best player Cade has ever played with is Jeremy Grant. And Jeremy Grant is like a third or fourth option on a good team, right? You have to build around him before you evaluate him. I know I see a ton of, saw it on 97.1 The Ticket this week saying, should the Pistons trade Cade Cunningham? Should the Tigers trade Tarek Skubal? Like, what are we doing? You just want Detroit fans to be miserable for the rest of their lives? You build around these franchise players that you draft, and you can evaluate and see what they need. What we saw this year is Cade Cunningham needs proper NBA spacing. Yes. That's all he needs. You got Fontecchio, and you saw the offense open up immediately. We didn't really get to see too much of Quentin Grimes, but I think Quentin Grimes could kind of play that Danny Green type of role in Detroit from the San Antonio Spurs from a few years ago.
Yep.
Another 3-and-D guy. Like, you get him proper 3-and-D wings, you get him more spacing so the lane isn't clogged 24/7. Pistons are going to win more than 14 games. I guarantee you guys that. This is a guy that you build around. This is a guy that's extremely easy to build around, but our franchise has decided to draft over fit. And then they're just going for potential and best player available. They don't really care if it fits or not, which I don't necessarily agree with. You don't use free agency whatsoever. Like, trade for Joe Harris, came off a serious calf injury, and he thought he was going to, turn back time and turn into like this 15-point per game, 3-point sniper. Like, I don't even know, Jeff. It's just, it's not hard to build around him. I don't get it.
Well, to address the trade Cade stuff from local media, to me, that's just yapping at this point. You're just kind of, it's this time of the year. Let's just talk to talk. And in my opinion, waste airtime. Like, I don't think trading Cade, there's not much of an argument behind it, except he's your best asset. Trade him. That, to me, does not make any sense. I think you nailed all the points you just laid out. I think it's well put. I think most Pistons fans agree that he has all the tools, but you just haven't been able to. You nailed it with the point of, how do you evaluate a player when the roster isn't even up to par? Not just at a decent level. It's not even up to that level. There's nothing's right with how, unless when you look at a player like Cade, okay, he's 6'6", 6'7", he can shoot he can score at all three levels. He's a great playmaker. He's a slower paced player, but I think that type of game translates into postseason. Like, there's a lot of things you do like with Cade, but then you look around and, like you said, you're like, the second best player arguably on this team is a guy they acquired at the deadline, who on most teams would be probably a sixth man on good teams, or potentially start, but not be your first, second, or third option. Like, that to me is concerning. And I think it speaks more to the Pistons than it does Cade. I think there's more pressure on the Pistons to build this thing around Cade because you're right. He's going to sign the extension because the NBA incentivizes players to sign that extension. But to keep this man in Detroit, I'm talking long term, not just signing the extension. The pressure to me is on the Pistons more than it is on Cade to prove he's a franchise player. Like, get him talent, get to the postseason, and then we can evaluate players. Just like Anthony Edwards has been, his stock has risen now that he's been in the postseason making plays. You can't even evaluate Cade because the team isn't even close to being a playoff team. And I think the blame is there's a lot of things you can point to than just Cade Cunningham. Like, I think we just have to be honest. He's not a revolution. He's not a type of prospect that's going to revolutionize a franchise, but he's a damn good player. You look at what he did his rookie year, post All-Star break, that team was almost 500. I mean, we got to be realistic here. That was with Dwayne Casey and Jeremy Grant. But that team was almost 500 after the All-Star break. Like, what went wrong from that point on? That's what you have to ask yourself, because the 14-win stuff, and I know last year he was out, but that is not – you look at a lot of things other than Cade Cunningham. Like, we agree 100%.
Yeah, I mean, they built a team that wasn't good enough to compete for the play-in, but bad enough to get a top 5 pick again. Like, I think that's been the goal. That's been the goal for the past 4 years. Just get teams that can get you in the top 5 lottery odds. And I was listening to a really old Stan Van Gundy interview with Mike Folletti, and Stan's like, it's not that hard to build a shitty team. Anyone can do it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. He's like, what's hard is building a competitive team because you don't know. And I think that's what the Pistons have done the past 4 years, is just build a shitty ass team and just say, hey, we're tanking, we're restoring you guys. It's not a rebuild, it's a restoration. Like, stop with the PR bullshit.
Yeah, no, it's been far from that. It's been, like you said, there's two sides. There's one side where it's like, okay, I like the collection of young talent, but then there's the other side where it's like, where has this thing gone? It's actually gotten worse, which is hard to do. It seems like they're doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result, which to me is literally the definition of insanity. I mean, you're like, maybe we try it the same way and we get a different result. It's like, no, this is why you're where you are as an organization. Like, it's it's an organization that holds a lot of weight historically. It's just sad, extremely sad.
I think that's why we brought in a president that we haven't had since SVG. I think that's why they did it. They know that they need change. They know that they need someone that is going to try to right this ship, because right now it's the Titanic, and it's been the Titanic for 2 years. I think this offseason is probably the most important offseason the Pistons have probably had in 10 years. I really do.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And real quick, I want to address, because this, and Truth Teller, shout out to him. He's always in our chat. He says, so Jeff, if you're saying you can't evaluate Cade, then why doesn't Duren and Ivy get that type of leeway, considering they've only had 2 years to develop in the most dysfunctional situation? I actually agree with this comment. The thing, though, you have to understand, and you brought this up earlier, Anthony, when we talked about trading players potentially, it's just where you are. It's like, it's unfortunate. It's not that, do I want to wait and see if Cade and Ivy can thrive together? Yes. And Duren, and we already said we're cool with Duren. But the reality is, where you are as an organization, a team that doesn't have a lot of assets, and you said it, you're going to have to get comfortable with trading away a player that you don't want to trade away. And to me, that's not Cade. That's not Duren. It's Ivy. He is the odd one out, even though it is unfair. So I don't even disagree with this comment. I think all these players that you've drafted deserve leeway, but it's just, the unfortunate reality of where you are as an organization. Like, you're going to have to make a move that you necessarily aren't, completely sold to do, but you got to get out of this, hole that you've dug yourself in, or at least a GM has dug them in, as many would argue. But it's sad.
Yeah, it's to the point where, like, I'll kind of answer Truth Teller's question. You can't evaluate Cade, but why doesn't Ivy and Duren get the same type of leeway? Well, if I know this is a cop out, but if they were number 1 picks, they would probably get the same kind of respect that Cade would. But Ivy was a 5th overall pick and Duren was late lottery. And I think that has to do with a lot. It's like a lot of, like, you never really saw this season Monty rip out Cade, like, ever. But You saw it a hell of a lot with Ivy. Like, Ivy would start some nights, he'd come off the bench or play like 10 minutes. And it's like,
which was bullshit, by the way. Yeah.
I've said it before. I think Jaden Ivey's had the toughest road out of everybody on this team, because if you document it and you look back, he comes in, he's a 2 guard next to Cade his rookie year. Cade gets out. He's the man under Dwayne Casey, and he's the starting point guard. And obviously, he had a good season, made a lot of mistakes. Monty comes in, and Monty's like, yeah, we're going to start Killian Hayes. Now you have to adjust to a new role. You're going to be coming off the bench. That gets stopped because the organization's like, yo, like, what are you doing with our 5th overall pick last year? He shouldn't be off the bench. So now Ivy has to get adjusted to starting again. Like, I feel so bad for Jaden Ivey because he's had to adjust to 2 different head coaches, 3 different roles in like a 24-month span. Like, I can't imagine what that does to a player mentally, confidence-wise. Like, I feel for Jaden Ivey. I'm still incredibly high on him, but
and he's catching strays from Monty too. It's it's tough. I agree with you. Toughest road for him.
It really is. Duran fits with Cade in lieu of his flaws. Ivy doesn't. I think Ivy can fit, but he has to be a consistent jump shooter. I'll say that, Angel.
Yeah,
but he's not. So like I said, that's a big.
And you'd like more of a sample size. I mean, you've had 1 season, and it was a rocky road this season for Ivy. You'd like more of a sample size, but we'll see.
Exactly.
We'll see what Trajan thinks.
For sure. We have one more topic to get into. This will be a very short topic. It won't be too long. And hold on. So I don't know if you saw, but Simone Fontecchio actually had surgery over the weekend on his left foot. Now, a lot of Pistons fans thought that, his end of the season injury on his toe was fake. Like, I saw that on Twitter. Like, oh, he's just faking it. Like, they're tanking, they're shutting him down. He had surgery on his foot. And obviously, it's just minor surgery because he wants to play in the Olympics for Team Italy. So that tells me he'll be good to go in another 2 months or so. This, little bit of news, a little bit of housekeeping to keep fans updated on.
What a dog. Absolute dog.
A guy.
Sorry to throw that in there. We continue.
No, he definitely is. He just threw me off, man. I don't know if it.
Playing for Team Italy, man. So
yeah,
love him for that.
Sure, for sure. I mean, Killian made Team France. I was kind of surprised by that, but hey.
Okay, well, maybe it's a good thing for the U.S. then. But continue.
I mean, there's nothing really there. I just update people that he had surgery on his left foot.
Yeah, that was the topic. Okay, well,
that's literally it, man. That's all. Like I said, trying to find.
I love Fontecchio. And especially for a season that there was more times I was pissed off than enjoying myself. A part of the season where I had more fun was watching Simone Fontecchio play basketball. Very smart player, dude. And I think his skill set, talk about complimentary, he compliments Cade. So I love it. I give him whatever he wants, keep him around long term. And he's a player that I think will only continue to get better. A very, very smart basketball player, man. I love the trade. That is one of the few things, at least over the last couple of years, in terms of moves, where I've sat there and said, I can get on board with this. I like this player. Now keep him around. Give him an extension.
If he was German, I don't think you'd like him too much.
There's also that part of the argument. Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, we're both Italian, so I know you like him because he's Italian. You were probably losing your shit when we had Gallinari and Fontecchio. You probably
it was great. Yeah, hell yeah.
Okay. I like Simone though. He's very underrated, and it just kind of shows you how deep the Jazz were because they weren't even playing him.
I know,
dude. Like I was on your bench and you weren't even playing. I'm like, what the F, man? Like honestly. Do you have time for a couple Q&A questions from the fans watching right now?
Yeah, of course.
For sure. I think I only grabbed a couple. We're just talking about Fontecchio. Yeah, we're probably going to keep him. What's the Duran question? Y'all think Duran can end up playing defense eventually? I'm severely questioning it.
And I love Apollo, by the way. That's my
Yeah.
guy. I already spoke on that. I was disappointed because I think Duran has all the tools. You look at him in his rookie year, you're like, okay, that could be an absolute anchor defensively. But man, to me, it comes with experience playing, because then the game will slow down, because I think he has all the tools. It's effort. It's like he has the athleticism. He has the size, like he has everything you'd think. Yes, Apollo, to answer your question, he can end up being a really, really good rim protector. But there are some guys that just, you have to have a knack for just blocking shots. And I think Jalen Duren has that. But can he be, 3 blocks a game? Probably not. But can he give you 2.5 for a career average? I hope so.
I honestly think the one thing that I watched a lot with him last year, which was encouraging, was he didn't necessarily play bad defense last year. It's just he was trying to analyze who's going to get the guy on the wing, who's going to get the guy, underneath the basket. I honestly think that he can play defense the way that Pistons fans want him to play. I think my goal for him is I need a block and a half a game. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think he has all the physical tools to block at least a shot a game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we saw games where he was blocking 5-6 shots against the Bulls. I think he has all the tools to do that. And I think there's a lot of positive signs. We saw a lot of flashes this year of what he could become. I just think the consistency isn't there yet. We have to remember he's only 20 years old.
Mm-hmm. You want him to be able just to react. Just the thinking is I think the being young, which
my goal for him is just try. Like I don't care if you get in foul trouble. Like just attempt, just try. Like kind of like what we saw from James Wiseman this year. Like James Wiseman, even though he got dunked on sometimes, he was trying, and that's all I really want from Duren is just attempt. Like if you get in foul trouble, that's okay. You'll learn. You'll watch film, and you'll get better. But I think he will eventually be a better defender. But we just have to stay a little bit more patient with him and have to remind ourselves he just turned 20 years old this past season.
Right.
Let's see. This is a question from Life with Chris, and I actually like this question. I think both of us could have different answers. What moves do you think fans turned on Troy Weaver about?
Where do we start? You know what I think? The first move that aged that it still lingers too, because I still have conversations. It has to be not the worst. I don't think this is the worst, but it definitely is one of the worst, is passing on Tyrese Halliburton. I think that's definitely up there, because that's something that as Killian continued to play, people still brought up. There are, trades also that were just absolutely abysmal. I think the Sadiq Bey for James Wiseman's up there. That one was a head scratcher, a complete head scratcher. Even though I think Bey was not going to stay, I think trading for Wiseman was a head scratcher. So, yeah, those are two quick ones off the top of my mind. There's probably more, a lot more that people bring up. But I think those two probably people bring up the most, at least in my experience, when talking about Troy Weaver. Those two moves.
I would say I'll keep it in the same draft. I think trading for Isaiah Stewart wasn't a bad move. I think trading and having draft pick protections until 2027 or 2028 was probably the biggest mistake he made, because
that's fair.
The Pistons can't physically trade draft picks, but they can make trades on draft night. I know it's complicated, but still, like, if you were wanting to get into sweepstakes with players like, let's say, DeJounte Murray, for example, and you want to, trade draft picks, you can't really do it because there's protections on that Isaiah Stewart trade that the Knicks own your pick now for the next couple of seasons. That's one off the top of my head. I'll keep it in the same draft. You passed on Tyrese Maxey not once, but twice, but 3 times.
Another one.
Yeah. 2 of the guards that you like. I know it's easy for us to have this revisionist history, But Halliburton making the Eastern Conference Finals, being the man with the Pacers, not a good look. The organization would probably be in a completely different situation if you drafted, one or both of those guys. You could have drafted both of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Bafer Wiseman one is a big head scratcher, but we kind of know that, Troy really does love centers. I mean, he almost didn't draft Cade Cunningham, man. He wanted Evan Mobley. It won, which I like Evan Mobley, but not at one. I think there's a
No.
lot of transactions that he's made that I just don't agree with. Like the stretching of waiving of players. Like, we're still paying Dwayne Dedman, and he's in the G League.
Oh my God.
Like,
someone just put something in the chat too. It was Red
Red
Baron
Baron.
Arcade. Yeah, not trading Bojan sooner was a mistake. That I agree with, because I was on the airwaves complaining about that for months. So that's another one. There is oh my gosh, like when you really look back, there are more than we probably even initially think of that are just awful moves. There are some things that I do like. Trading on draft night to acquire Jalen Duren, loved it.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, it all started with his first draft. Oh my gosh, what a way to enter! Your first couple moves are just head scratchers. Jesus.
This is a good question, and I think when you try to compare the two, who's worse, Stan Van Gundy or Troy Weaver? I will give Stan Van Gundy this credit. Stan Van Gundy came into a roster that wasn't talented and wasn't that great. And he had a plan. He knew what type of players he wanted, and he went out and got them in free agency. Now, did he overpay for guys like John Lure? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did he go out and, trade for guys that maybe we didn't want? Sure. I mean, he traded for guys like Ersan Ilyasova, which was really cheap, really good, stretch four at the time. He got like a second round pick. He traded to Phoenix, and he got like a Marcus Morris, Reggie Bullock, and Danny Granger, who never suited up for the Pistons. But Stan knew what he wanted. He knew what the type of archetype of players that he needed to at least try to be competitive. Where Troy is really good at talent evaluation and finding talent in the lottery, but I think the main difference, and they kind of are similar, is Troy really didn't attack free agency the way that you should when you're a mid-market team like the Detroit Pistons. Now, we're not saying like you're going to get a James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, but you can get those, B minus, C plus guys that are good role players that come to your team. And I think if, Troy and the Pistons did that, they'd be in a completely different situation. Like the fact that we passed on last free agency was a big red flag to me, because I thought Cameron Johnson would have been a good fit. I thought Kyle Kuzma would have been a good fit. Grant Williams, PJ Washington. Front office said, nah, we're good.
I think you put that the best. And I agree. That I think both of their strengths are different, but both things that they were not great at are different. So it depends what you value being a GM on. If you're looking at win-loss record, then you go with Stan Van Gundy. But if you're going on evaluating talent in the draft, you'd probably give it to Troy Weaver. I mean, I'm curious if Donovan Mitchell didn't miss a shot in a workout, would Troy miss on him or not take him? Take Luke Kennard. I'm curious because that would be the ultimate test. Probably not. Who knows? But I think you put it the best. I agree with everything you said.
Yes, Stan just he knew what he wanted. Where I don't know if Troy wanted to play the long game and just try to stockpile talent and possibly trade those draft picks and like maybe just keep one of those draft picks and try to build that way. I don't know because I don't really know what the ultimate plan was under his tenure. I don't know if it was just to accumulate top 5 picks and make a splash when you have a little bit more cap space. I really don't know, but to be fair, when Troy did take over, he had Blake Griffin on the books. And that was probably really hard to try to get free agents. We'll do one more question, and it's about Tobias Harris. So I can't find the question, but I did see it earlier. Do you think that he's a free agent that the Pistons should target? And is there a number where you're comfortable with? And if it gets higher than that, just say no thanks.
So I see the Tobias Harris stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is somebody that, to me, when you look at on paper, okay, and look at his career. Now I know the recency. If you're going off, what you've done for me lately, dropping a dud in the playoffs was not a good selling point for him in free agency. I would be open to him being a Detroit Piston because of his ability to space the floor. Now, that comes to me. The biggest thing with Tobias is how much are you paying him? Okay, that is the biggest thing. And I don't know. I don't know what he's projected to get. I don't know what it would be in Detroit. But assuming what it would be, I would say no. I'm not going to overpay for Tobias Harris. That is absolute blasphemy. He is a guy that I think on a good roster, even on a good roster. I mean, look at what he's done with the 76ers and being a third option there. Like, that dude there'll be times where he just does not show up. So that is concerning to me. And I think in Detroit, even though he was a Piston at one time, I don't know if I love him on the Pistons for a good amount of money. I'm not willing to overpay for Tobias Harris. Hell no. So to keep it short, assuming he's going to get a decent amount of money, no. But if it's a little bit of a bargain, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, I think if you get into the $30-40 million conversations, then that's where I would be out. But I think there is a price point and there is value. If you can get him for around 15 and I'll say 20, 15 to 20, I think there's value there. But to your point, recency bias is a hell of a thing. He had a really bad playoffs, man. He had one good game in the playoffs. One good game. And I watched Rasheed Wallace's podcast. He was ripping them every game. Like, I just need you to score at least 15 points. Can you give me that? And had a hell of a time trying to score in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And to a lot of fans' point, they're like, why would we get a guy that's 31 years old when we had him when he was younger and he didn't really play any defense against the Cavs in the first round of the playoffs when LeBron and Kyrie swept the Pistons back then? I personally think if you want a small forward and you're dead set on a small forward in free agency, I think there are cheaper options available. Like,
I agree.
One guy that I'll probably name, maybe fans don't know what it is, maybe some fans do because they watch the NBA. I really like Royce O'Neal. He's a guy that can play both power forward and small forward, and he's a cheaper option. You're not going to have to spend $30 million on a Royce O'Neal. You could probably get him for, like, I don't know, 2 for 15. Like, you could get him on a cheaper deal. I honestly think that's the route the Pistons should take, is, filling out that bench and filling out, veterans and role players to surround Cade Cunningham and company with. I don't really think maxing out a guy like Tobias Harris at this stage of his career makes a whole lot of sense if you're trying to win more basketball games, if you're trying to win more than 20 games going into next season. I think if your goal is to try to push for the play-in and play-in's your goal, you have to spend your money wisely, and you really have to get this offseason on track.
Yeah, to me, this in free agency, it should be about acquiring shooting and acquiring veterans and mixing the two. Actually, if you can get guys that can shoot the ball and have played in this league and played for different franchises and check the box in terms of character traits, then yeah, that should be it's kind of like what Brad always says too. It's you fill holes in free agency and you draft talent through the draft. You draft the best possible player, and the Pistons have just not been able to even, like you already put earlier, but have not been able to get free agency right. So hopefully this is the year where you kind of get spacing, and you also get guys that are professionals.
Yeah, for sure. Just to answer a question, Devon, no, I don't want any big fishes in this free agency class. I think the biggest fish would probably be Paul George. And I don't think the Pistons, not to say that they don't have the money for Paul George, I just think when you look at Paul George, he wants to go to a winning situation. And I think the two teams that makes the most sense in the East would be Orlando and Philly. I think those are the two teams in the East, and maybe you throw in Indiana if Indiana gets weird. Depends how they end their playoffs. You never really know. You could even throw New York in there because I guess there's no guarantee that OG Anunoby is going to resign with the Knicks. So maybe if you're the Pistons, you throw the bag at OG Anunoby and see what happens. I don't know.
Paul George, absolutely not. And I don't think it makes sense if you're Paul George. I mean, if I'm Paul George, I want a ring. I'm not going to Detroit for a bag. I think Paul George has made a lot of money in his career. Okay, he wants to go to a situation where he can win, and that's why you brought up the Magic and where they're going, and Philly. Not saying those teams are going to win an absolute guarantee to win a ring, but at least they'll be competitive and they'll have playoff runs, and he can still be, he can still get his in those situations and win games. But OG Anunoby, I'm listening. All right. I'm intrigued. I think you saw what he provided for New York when he was acquired. He was an absolute difference maker on both sides. Defensively, he changed a lot of things for what they can do and who they can match up with. So I'm comfortable with OG Anunoby. That's a player that I think, I don't know how people would describe a big fish. I feel like sometimes that's subjective how you describe. I think OG Anunoby, if you walked away with OG, oh my goodness. I'm cool with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it'd have to be a lot of convincing. I don't know how OG feels about New York or how he feels about playing 48 minutes a game. I really don't. And Tibbs is a hell of a coach.
Yes.
But I think some players, when they do play for them, you saw it this year in the playoffs, like Randall and like half of their roster was just out from playing really high minutes and they're getting worn out. Like Jalen Brunson, I think he was playing with like a broken hand like the whole series because he played such high minutes throughout the season. Like that wears on a player, and that's something that you have to take in consideration when you're talking about OG Anunoby, who, not saying he's injury prone, but he has had injuries throughout his career. Maybe he doesn't want to play 48 minutes a night,
Right.
Yeah. But we can wrap this podcast up. I do want to give you the floor to plug your podcast where people can find it and where they can watch it Monday through Friday.
Yes, we are on all social media platforms at Official CT Pod. On Instagram, it is Official CT Sports. And I think on TikTok, we're Official Crunch Time. But on YouTube, you can check us out. We're live weekdays, Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. I said 8 a.m. 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Me, Booner, Lucas, and Gentry. We have a lot of fun. And we cover all Detroit sports. So come hang out with us. Come hang out with the fellas. We try to be entertaining. Also scream at each other when we have to, but also, have fun conversations when we can have to. You never know what to expect. So I appreciate you for having me on. I love coming on, man. You're doing a great job. Now, I even tune into your content, especially you and Sean Murphy, Brandon Dent. You guys are all my guys. So keep up the great work, and let's do this again. Maybe even post-draft, pre-draft. Let's make it happen. Let's do it.
I mean, I'm thinking like Crunch Time and Pistons stock need to do something for the NBA draft.
Let's do it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Let's do it.
I'm not doing the full 2 nights, but first round for sure. So I'm not watching the second round probably.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm with you. Let's do it. We're trying to plan something right now. We're in the works, so I'm completely down.
Same here, man. Same here.
But I appreciate you, brother. I had a lot of fun today. Appreciate the chat too, man. Shout out to all you. Even if you disagree with what I said, at least you tuned in. So appreciate you.
I looking at most of the comments, the chat, they love you. They do. Appreciate all 600 of you guys, tapping in tonight on a Sunday night at 9:00 at night. We really do appreciate that. If you do want to follow Jeff and his podcast, every social media platform that they have is down below in the description. I put links to it. So you guys, all you have to do is click on that and follow it. And you can follow Jeff on Twitter as well if you want to keep up with him on there. But they do a really good job over at Crunch Time. I think my favorite thing over there is when you guys piss Booner off, because it's amazing. He gets so heated. Lucas does a really good job of just getting under his skin, and it seems like it's once an episode he just says something and he's just like, I'm gonna leave. I swear I'm gonna leave. It's so funny.
It's like even though he's older than me, it's like screwing with your little brother a little bit, just teasing him. He's a good sport though. I love Booner. They're all talented. I mean, they're good guys, great guys. Those are my brothers.
For sure, man. I'm proud of you guys. It's just sticking it to the man and just saying, hey, we can do this shit too. You're not special. But again, appreciate all you guys watching. you want to go follow Jeff and his podcast, again, down below in the description. We will see you guys next week. Hope you guys have a great Memorial Day tomorrow. Peace.
Yep.